Okay, I'd like to go ahead and get started. It's Michelle Savage again here from XBRL US, and I want to welcome everyone to our program today, which is analysis with structured data. It's the Data Act webinar. This program is brought to you through a partnership that we have with AGA, which is a member organization for financial professionals in government, and XBRL US. We are the National Consortium for the Business Reporting Standard. Just a few logistical points that I'd like to make before we move ahead. If you do have questions, there is a question and answer link on your console that you can see at the top of your screen. Just click on that and you'll be able to submit questions, which we will take through the program. For those of you who are interested in getting CPE credit for this program, you must respond to 4 poll questions, which we will take at 2 points during the program today. So make sure that you respond to those poll questions, and then your CPE certificate will be emailed to you within the next 2 weeks. As we go through the program, if you have any kind of technical issues, please email us at support, SUPPORT, at xbrl.us, and we will do our best to get you back up and online. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our host, and our host today is Herschel Chandler. Herschel is a principal with IUI, and he has been working in the data science field for over 20 years. He has a great passion for both the Data Act and the power of open data. Herschel is a frequent contributor to the Data Act GitHub. And so with that, I'm going to start our first slide and turn it over to Herschel.
Well, thanks, Michelle, and welcome everyone to our latest in the Data Act series, where we begin to more deeply explore what's possible with Data Act data. So for today's discussion, Marcel Hemio will start us off by framing the discussion as to why this is important for agencies. Marcel just joined the Office of the Fiscal Assistant Secretary at Treasury. He is a solution architect and will play a technical leadership role on the implementation of the Data Act. Marcel was the chair of the Data Stewardship Program at Treasury's Bureau of the Fiscal Service. In this capacity, he has aligned business needs to data services and data capabilities. He's ensured the delivery of an enterprise-wide data strategy and execution. He's established novel ways to integrate data governance as a service and integrated a design thinking approach to the management of data. Marcel has also been acting as the Director of Enterprise Architecture at the Fiscal Service. In this capacity, he has delivered business architecture services that propel a business outcome approach to enterprise architecture. Next up will be Caitlin Devine to talk to us about the broker. Caitlin is the product owner for the broker and publication work streams for the Data Act implementation at the Department of Treasury. She is on detail from 18F, a digital consultancy inside the General Services Administration, where she previously served as the Director of Engineering. Prior to joining the federal government, Caitlin was at the Sunlight Foundation, where she worked on projects like the Procurement Open Data Guidelines, Journalism, PolitiWhoops, Clear Spending, and the Sunlight API portal. Sunlight's a very well-known open data proponent. Next up will be Mark Montoya. Mark will lead us through an FDIC example of mapping and analysis. Mark works in the Data Strategy Group for the Division of Insurance and Research at the FDIC. Mark is responsible for directing complex statistical analysis on banking industry trends and conditions. Mark was one of the original founders of the Central Data Repository, an XBRL-based financial reporting collection system shared by the Federal Reserve Board, the Office of Comptroller Currency, and the FDIC. Mark has been involved with XBRL since 2001. Campbell Pride will complete the webinar with a case study on public company financial analysis. Campbell brings significant experience in technology development, accounting, and finance to XBRL US. Before taking on the president and CEO position, Campbell led the development and maintenance of taxonomies as Chief Standards Officer, playing an integral role on the executive team. He joined XBRL US from Morgan Stanley, where as Executive Director in the Institutional Securities Group, he managed the equity research XBRL-based valuation framework. He has been involved with XBRL since 2001 and served as chairman of the XBRL US Domain Steering Committee during the critical initial build of the US GAAP taxonomy under contract with the Securities and Exchange Commission. So as you can see, we have a great lineup today as we start to dig deeper into the value proposition of the Data Act. So Marcel, why is this important?
Thank you, Herschel. I appreciate that. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Marcel Hemio. I am with Treasury. This is my second day, and I'm very excited about being here. Let me give you a little bit of background before I step into the points that I'm going to be making this afternoon. One is I've delivered 2 global data standards for industry, and that's given me the experience to know what it takes to actually deliver standards. That it's not simple, it is very difficult, but it's very doable. The other thing, too, is to let everybody know that I've had background as a voting member of the W3C XML Schema Working Group. I've been an invited expert by the United Nations CFAC Design Rules Committee. Been involved with ISO 2002 Payment Kernel Standardization, which involved elements from NACHA and SWIFT. And then most recently, as Herschel mentioned, head of enterprise architecture. The reason why I want to focus on this last one is that it is very important when delivering and structuring data is to realize that data isn't a single dimensional or a single discipline effort. It is multidimensional, and it requires looking at a solution through a variety of different lenses. Because if you look at a solution through one lens, then you end up building a one lens, a one non-reusable solution. And that's not the way that this century operates. It's not the way that the opportunities that the Data Act is going to provide can deliver. So it's very important, at least from my perspective, to see it from a business perspective, from a data perspective, from a security perspective, from a technical perspective, and bring those together. The value of structured data is actually written in the law itself. So let's think about this. What does that mean? With data, there are possibilities endless, but only if it's done appropriately with deliberate steps and deliberate decisions made. So let's think about this. In the actual Data Act itself, it says establish government-wide data standards for financial data and to provide consistent, reliable, and searchable data. This is not a simple thing that can't be done without proper design, without proper thinking and thinking of the implications and the consequences of those decisions that need to be made. This is a holistic view of understanding how data can be designed to deliver the kind of things that the Data Act wants to deliver. So thinking about how data can be accurately displayed for taxpayers and for policymakers. Again, pulling this out of the Data Act law itself. Simplifying reporting for entities receiving federal funds by streamlining reporting requirements. These are things that are practically unheard of when you're thinking about how data can be used. The reason why I'm focusing on this is because usually when you think of data, you think of the technology. And the technology is an essential component, but it is not itself the solution. It needs to have context, and that context is driven by solving the business problems. So a technically elegant solution might be elegant, but if it doesn't solve a business problem, then it's not solving the problem. It's not a solution in and of itself. I joined the Data Act team because we're a committed team of experts that are asking those questions. What can we do with data? Poking and prodding the current ways of doing business to see the realm of possible. Because not only is it the law, it's also a good way of designing data standards and delivering those standards. Our success metrics aren't the delivery of the standards, no. I think to do that would be taking the Data Act law and the purpose of it off to the side and not really focusing on the value of it. The success metrics that we have are to foster creativity, to be innovative, and to help partners like everybody on this call to take advantage of the good work that government is doing. Think of it this way. Standards don't stifle creativity. In fact, standards make creativity and innovation flourish. Think of musical notation. When Mozart, Bach, and Beethoven wrote their wonderful music, they wrote it in this musical notation. It's the same notation that we have today that's reflected in the music from Jay-Z, in the music from Justin Bieber, in the music from my favorite, Miles Davis. That is a standard that is used to reflect a broad array of sounds and music. The Data Act effort is no different. It is there to create innovation, to create opportunities. It's up to us to deliver that. There is there's a gap between the potential value and the realized value. There is the promise of data standards, the promise of bringing data together so it can be understood in context. But then there's the realized value of actually building the things that make that happen. We need to close that gap. And we can't do this alone. We can design, we can muster the people, but it takes a partnership. And I think in closing, that partnership is essential because Treasury can't do it on our own. We need our partners. We need the Office of Management and Budget. We need agencies. We need everybody on this call. We need vendors. We need people to see and understand the kind of value we want to bring. The world is watching, and I know they are. The world wants to see us succeed, but we can't succeed unless we can muster and energize and engage, because coming up with solutions on our own, we can do that and be not successful. This is about bringing everybody the success that we know that is possible with the Data Act. Again, standards don't stifle creativity, they make it possible. I think the last point I want to make is, as the newest member of the Data Act team, I am energized by the excitement that the Data Act introduces. Never in my professional career has the emphasis of data been so pronounced and so mainstream. The work of data is going to be difficult, it's complex, but understanding the complexity and iterating on that complexity and realizing that we're solving a business problem that has stood the test of time. Everybody in this space knows the issues that surround the kind of work that we're up against, and we are sensitive. I'm sensitive to the history of tried attempts, of new attempts of standardizing the data. The Data Act gives us the possibility to rethink how data is managed for the 21st century, because we need to. The kind of problems that we're looking at solving, integrating different domains that are so close to being integrated, is that last mile. We can do this. Standards are an enabler, and I'm looking forward to bringing that value to and making myself available to all that are on the call and all that see the value in the Data Act. Again, my name is Marcel Hemio. My contact information, while I don't know if it's going to be available, is marcel.hemio@treasury.gov, and look forward to engaging with all at a time soon. Thank you very much. Herschel, back to you.
Thank you, Marcel. And I think I would not be alone in saying that's the first time I've heard the Data Act, Mozart, and Justin Bieber all together in one sentence. So very, very interesting perspective. We appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Herschel. Appreciate that.
Sure thing. Caitlin. Caitlin's going to talk to us about the broker, which is really the all-important piece in this. So, Caitlin.
Thank you, Herschel. Let's see. So I think I need to share my screen here. One moment.
Caitlin, this is Michelle here. I'm going to go ahead and turn slides for you, if that's okay.
Oh, sure, yeah. Okay,
So
feel free.
Just make sure I'm on the right slide and tell me when to flip if I haven't so far.
Great, I'll do that. Okay, yeah, I'm Caitlin Devine. Like Marcel, this is really my second day at Treasury. So it's been fun kind of starting on the same day, and I have to echo his enthusiasm and excitement to work on this project. Not only is the team working on it just really fantastic and so enthusiastic and dedicated to making this data more open, but this is really I think my 7th year working in this specific subject matter. As Herschel said, I was previously at the Sunlight Foundation, where I worked on a site, Clear Spending, that tried to assess the quality of the data in the original iteration of USA Spending. And since then, it's just been this journey from trying to make the data better and advocating for legislation that would make the data better. And now here I am on the other side in the federal government actually working on implementation. So it's kind of a really, really neat, exciting journey. So I'm really excited to be at this point. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So the main crux of the Data Act and what makes it so special is that it provides this linkage between broad financial information and the award level information. You can go to the next slide. So in the first iteration of USA spending, we could get appropriation account data from the SF-133s and some other Treasury sources. And then on USA spending, we had the award level data. Now, appropriation accounts can fund multiple awards, and awards can be funded by multiple appropriation accounts. So you have kind of this complex many-to-many relationship, which if you're kind of trying to walk this back from the award level to say, like, how do I complete this full life cycle of spending? And like, I want to find out, like, what did my legislator vote to appropriate, and then what did that in turn fund? You really couldn't do that. I mean, you still can't do that. And that's, you know, sort of at the core of our democracy, is to see what our priorities are as a nation in terms of where we spend money, and then holding our elected representatives accountable for that. So this was something that I always, me and like other people in the oversight community were always trying to get at when we were working with this data. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, this is actually, you can go to the next one. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. So the Data Act requires, you know, additional reporting by object class and program activity. And in this case, even breaking those obligations out for each award by each object class and program activity and appropriation account. So what we're looking at here is a really granular view of the data that does make it possible to do this crosswalk and find out which appropriations accounts were funded by what, you know, legislation, and what awards were funded by those accounts. And because, you know, in some cases you might have awards that are funded by even multiple accounts across multiple agencies, and it can get very complex very, very quickly. You can go to the next slide. So we took a stab at just kind of showing you some of the questions that you'll be able to answer once we have this award level financial linkage. You know, what percentage of the money in this appropriations account has already been obligated this fiscal year, and what remains? Which appropriation accounts fund what programs? What kinds of things are funded from a single appropriations account? And that could give us a lot of insight. And, you know, do we have these things kind of collected in logical units? What's every contractor who has received money from a certain account? Because a lot of times, I think in the federal community, the definition of program has been famously nebulous. And so often on the appropriation side, programs are defined by their appropriations account. So it's kind of, you know, the closest we can get to really figuring out what programs are legislated and appropriated, and then what they're actually spending money on. Next slide. So one of the first things that we built as part of this process, and one of the really exciting things I think personally about the team at Treasury is we're taking this agile, iterative approach to the development of this. So this is this huge, you know, multi-agency, broad stakeholder effort, right, to really make the Data Act come together and be realized. And so, you know, trying to do that in kind of a waterfall process, I think, is a recipe for a disaster. So I'm just really thrilled that we've been using this agile approach and getting consistent feedback, and you know, doing regular user research and letting all of that feed back into the development of the software tools that we're building. So one of those tools is the data broker, and this is essentially a tool that agencies can submit individual files with different information, and the broker will link them together and then format them in an XBRL output that is consistent with the data schema and standard that we're developing. So the broker actually takes 5 files. One is, you know, appropriations amount, appropriations information, object class and program activity information, award level information, awardee attributes, and the award financial attributes. And it takes all of these, links them together into consistent records, and then formats them for publication. And right now, you know, we're going to be formatting them basically as any format that most people would want to download them in, including like XBRL, JSON, or CSV. And we're also going to be allowing for agencies to submit in different formats. So right now we're using CSVs because it's kind of like the most basic common denominator across agencies and what people feel comfortable with. And because we're working in a agile mindset, we're developing an MVP, which is a minimum viable product first, and then iterating from there and adding in features and capability as we go, and as we interview agency users and find out, what is going to be easiest for them. So you can go to the next slide. Yeah, I got ahead of myself again. You can get to the next slide. I'll just talk and talk. I don't need the slides, I just talk myself. So that's kind of the summary of what the data broker does. I don't know if it's showing up. I think the text is wrapping, or I'm seeing some kind of weird artifact in the last slide. But if you look at the slides after they're published, you can see the link to the GitHub repository, where actually all of the source code for the broker is public there. And also the data standard on the GitHub site that we've been using to kind of interact with the public and get feedback on all of this. So that's kind of the basic overview of what the broker does right now. We definitely have a lot more planned for it and are conducting regular, we call them sandbox sessions, where users can come, attempt to generate the files that they would upload to the broker, so that they can start the exercise of seeing how complicated it will be to pull this information together for upload and see what kind of validation errors they might be generating. And we'll continue to do that on a regular basis. So that's it for me. Happy to, I don't know if there's a Q&A period at the end of this, but happy to answer any questions. You can contact.
Sorry. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say my contact information is just caitlin.devine@gsa.gov.
Great. Caitlin, thank you very much. I think
in here, the Central Data Repository, to the service broker. The service broker pulls nightly financial data from the Central Data Repository in a bulk format. The service broker essentially becomes a hub that offers financial data to downstream FDIC applications and systems. Consumers can also be assured that even though the data may change through time, the downstream applications that are accessing the data do not need to be updated every time the data changes. Next slide, please. So the Examiner Toolkit Suite, or ETS for short, provides a common interface for bank examiners to access multiple financial and non-financial data sets. The ETS application is used by the FDIC, the Federal Reserve, and state banking departments for on- and off-site examinations. ETS replaces an older bank examiner application called Genesis, which was a mainframe-based solution that provided financial data, and in many times older than 30 days. The updated ETS application provides examiners with enhanced capabilities such as secured wireless connectivity and instant messenger service for on-site examiner communication. So in addition to wireless and connectivity and communication, ETS provides examiners with faster access to financial data in close to a real-time means by secured services. XBRL standards are used by ETS to consume and present a bank's most recent call report and uniform bank performance report during a bank examination. ETS also makes use of technology called inline XBRL to present the bank's uniform bank performance report for trend and peer group analysis by examiners. Next slide, please. I want to provide some additional context. The slide's a little cut off, that's fine. I'd like to provide some additional context and background on the old examiner application called Genesis, and on how the data was prepared prior to the implementation of the enterprise service broker. So the original process had all the resources located on the mainframe. And on the slide, you'll see some acronyms that do not mean much, but they are what are financial systems that the examiners used to pull data from. So starting on the left side of the screen, there's a system called CBIZ, which is FDIC's Corporate Business Information System. Another system called CALL, which is the original call report system that was replaced by the Central Data Repository, and additional information that the examiners use to download into their tool for examination. So this slide shows the original bank data request and preparation process. So in step one, in the center of the slide, the process started with the examiner initiated a data request by logging into an interface called the Examination Download System, referred to as XDS, using their mainframe ID. Once the access is granted in step two, the examiner proceeds to request the data from the mainframe system. So the XDS interface provided the examiners an interface so they can download these from these multiple data sources. After the download was complete, the data was then quote-unquote assembled. So this is in step 4. So this assembly would take some time to assemble and compress. So this assemble file was called a Genesis data set, which is in step 5. And the Genesis data set was then encrypted in step 6 and made available for the examiner's application. Next slide, please. So the following slide shows the original data update, save, export process for the old examiner application. In the middle of the diagram, step 1, the compressed data set was consumed by the application, unencrypted, stored locally on the examiner's laptop. In step 2, the Genesis application displayed the call report and Uniform Bank Performance Report data in a facsimile format for the examiner to review. In step 3, the examiner would work with the call report data and derive ratios and calculations and search the Uniform Bank Performance Report facsimile for trends for the bank they're examining. And in step 4, all data modifications and that the examiner did during the examination and search results were then saved to a local access database on the examiner laptop. So it's important to note that prior to using the XBRL technologies, Genesis developers had to review the call report and the Uniform Bank Performance Report physical PDF files and manually code both the report presentations in the Genesis application. Next slide, please. So now I'd like to put all the pieces together and show the current big picture with the Central Data Repository's financial data, the Enterprise Architecture Service Broker, and the Examiner Toolkit Suite application. All 3 parts form a bigger whole picture. So the first part is the Central Data Repository. The financial data offered by the Central Data Repository has been vetted through an intense validation process by agency staff and contains no errors. The second part, financial data are downloaded nightly in the bulk format and offered to FDIC's internal applications via the service broker. And the final piece, ETS developers do not need to have a detailed understanding of the data offered via the service broker. The ETS developers only need to understand what services to call up in order to gain access to the financial data. And one other key aspect of the big picture I forgot to mention earlier, the fact that the data offered by the service broker follows a common data standard. And safe to say that common data standard we use here is the XBRL technology. Next slide, please. Let's see. Now here's the big picture from CDR. So this slide shows the interaction between the Central Data Repository and the Enterprise Architecture Service Broker. So in step 1, the service broker requests financial data from the Central Data Repository using services. And in step 2, the data requests from the Central Data Repository does not return a single quarter, single bank data set, but in fact returns multiple year and multiple bank bulk data sets. That is, the Central Data Repository provides data for all banks, for all periods, including all corresponding taxonomy sets. These data include both public and confidential items. The service broker stores all data received from the Central Data Repository in step 3. Now here is an important point in step 4. The service broker converts the taxonomies into customized data sets for use by the ETS application. Next slide, please. So this next slide shows the interaction between the Enterprise Architecture Service Broker and the Examiner Toolkit Suite application. So in step 1, the service broker receives data requests from ETS as opposed to ETS making requests directly to the Central Data Repository. So the service broker offers services that are designed to run as back-end processes and provides functionality not currently offered by the Central Data Repository architecture. As I stated earlier, I believe it is a benefit of having the level of abstraction from the actual source. This level of abstraction provides developers with the flexibility to develop new solutions around the data without having to understand the interworkings of the Central Data Repository system. So in step 2, the service broker makes the call report and the Uniform Bank Performance Report data available and produces customized data sets for the ETS application. The customized data sets offered by the service broker are subsets or views of the call report and Uniform Bank Performance Report taxonomy. And this includes additional metadata for distribution to back-end systems and metadata for analysis to the, for financial analysts. Next slide, please. So the ETS applications make use of the XBRL technologies, as I mentioned earlier, for the call report and the Uniform Bank Performance Report. So the XBRL instances offer call report information for current quarter, prior year, multiple year for a single bank. XBRL instances are also available for the same criteria for multiple banks. So ETS does not make use of the full taxonomy metadata, but uses a subset of the information contained in the call report. For example, ETS does not need to run the validation checks again. The data that ETS uses is considered clean data. ETS does make use of other metadata within the call report taxonomy, which is the call report presentation, report instructions, and calculations. So XBRL instances are also offered for the Uniform Bank Performance Report for a given bank and its peer groups. The Uniform Bank Performance Report presentation composition is much different than the call report. As such, the ETS application makes use of an XBRL technology called inline XBRL to present the reports to the examiners. And I should have explained this earlier. What do I mean by the Uniform Bank Performance Report earlier in my presentation? So the Uniform Bank Performance Report is an analytical tool created for bank supervisory, examination, and management purposes. UBPR shows the impact of management decisions and economic conditions on a bank's performance and balance sheet composition. The performance and composition data contained in the report can be used as an aid in evaluating adequacy of earnings, liquidity, capital, assets, and liability management for a bank. Next, oh, you're already there. So the next slide, this screenshot, this slide, you'll see in the slide here that it's actually a screenshot of the call report schedule in the ETS application. And this call report schedule is Schedule RCR Part 1, which is the regulatory capital components ratio schedule. So the information presented here are from the call report instances and call report taxonomy. As stated earlier, before ETS, Genesis developers had to review the call report and the Uniform Bank Performance Report physical PDF files and manually develop the views and presentation for the application. With ETS, developers consume the XBRL information and proceed with the development of the application. This updated process has drastically saved time and decreased development efforts for the call report and the Uniform Bank Performance Report in the ETS application. Next slide, please. The following is a screenshot, again, from the ETS application showing the Uniform Bank Performance Report. The ETS application uses inline XBRL to render the UBPR, the Uniform Bank Performance Report information, as opposed to just, I guess, rendering the normal XBRL files. So what is inline XBRL? Maybe I should have led with that. Inline XBRL is a technology for embedding XBRL tagging into human-readable documents, such as HTML pages. So why did ETS use inline XBRL as opposed to regular XBRL? If you look at the UBPR report in the slide, you'll notice that the report contains multiple dates, rows, and columns, which cannot be fully expressed using normal XBRL technology. So inline XBRL allowed FDIC to offer tagged XBRL data with HTML-like rendering for the ETS application. And the next slide, please. So that's a big story to get to the analysis, what the examiner does with the data. So this slide provides some information what the examiner does with the call and Uniform Bank Performance Report data. So during bank examinations, examiners make use of call report data to derive return on income, return on equity, and return on assets for a bank. Examiners have to derive their own numbers using the raw call report data. Examiners use the raw call report data to calculate liquidity, capital, and earning ratios for a bank. Call report data help examiners calculate a bank's CAMELS rating. So once derived, a bank's CAMELS rating shows the overall health of a financial institution. So what does CAMELS stand for? So C in CAMELS stands for capital adequacy, A is for assets, M's management and capability, earnings, E stands for earnings, L is liquidity, assets and liability management, and S is for sensitivity to market risk or interest rate risk. So CAMEL ratings go from 1 to 5, and 5 being the worst. And finally, the Uniform Bank Performance Report helps examiners look at trend analysis for a bank through time and within a bank's peer group. Examiners use this report to further their understanding of a bank's financial condition. For example, an examiner would do a trend analysis for a 4-rated bank, but not necessarily do it for a 1 or 2 rated bank, which is much healthier. As you can see, the data from the call report and UBP are very important for proper examination and analysis that the examiner uses to gauge the health of the bank. Thank you for letting me present today. I'll turn it back over to you, Michelle.
Hey, thanks, Mark. I appreciate that. I have to say, one of the things I found most interesting was the very first part we're talking about, how you manage data quality in the process. So with that, let's turn it over to Campbell. Campbell's going to talk to us about public company analysis. Campbell?
Great. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to go through today. I'm just going to start sharing my screen and just go through a demo for you. So basically, Michelle, if you just hand over control to me, that would be great, and then I can walk through this demonstration. So just to give you some background, I'm the CEO of XBRL US, and we as an organization are involved in promoting and building the XBRL standard. And one of the things that we started to do very early on was to try and take a lot of this data and then basically use it to do comparison analysis. So we have an internal infrastructure that we set up that allows us to take all the data that's filed in XBRL and then make that available to folks. So that infrastructure means that we can take any XBRL data and show it in very standardized tools.
And Campbell, Campbell's Michelle here. You just need to share your screen.
Yeah. You need to. Says that you cannot share while the other participant is sharing. So if you could stop sharing. Thank you. And so what we do is we take all the data that's filed with the SEC in an XBRL format, and it's loaded into our database. And even though we've had 7 different XBRL we've had 7 different taxonomies that have been published by the FASB over that time, the load process that we've had hasn't had to change at all. So we've made no coding changes to it, even though there's been significant changes in the taxonomies and the format of the data that drives it. And as Mark mentioned earlier with the Genesis system, every time they had to make a change to the UBR report, the programmers had to update the Genesis system. So this is one of the advantages of having standards, that you don't have to do that. So what we do, just to walk you through this, is we take that data, we load it into a database, and then we make it available. So we currently have an API, which is basically a way that anyone can go and take this data and pull it into a spreadsheet or into a web browser or into a web application, so that all that XBRL data is available to anyone who wants it. So what I've got on my screen here is an example of just a margin analysis, and I've taken some of the large companies who have government contracts with the government, just to make it a little bit relevant for you. And it just shows, you can see here, these are the companies, and we're pulling in their revenues and their net income. You see this is for the 3rd quarter of 2015, and it's showing margin analysis, and so you can do a comparison across these companies. But you can do similar things with any type of data. The data is kind of irrelevant. But this data, you can make requests to the API every time one of these values change. You can see here we're looking at 3rd quarter 2015. If we want to look at the 2nd quarter of 2015, we can do that too. If I update that, it calls the API, it goes out, it pulls all this data. And this is pulling it straight out of our database, which is basically pulled all this data in as it's filed in an XBRL format. So that's kind of really handy. You can see here, there's just functions that are put in here, and this is calling the API. If you wanted to use this API, it's available on GitHub. I'll just show you where that is. So if we go to screen here, I can pull that up. There, it's on GitHub, and if you look up for XBRL Data Analysis Toolkit, you'll find it. If you go to our website, XBRL US, we have a link to it as well. And what the API allows you to do, it just basically allows you to basically build little queries effectively in the URL of a browser, and then you can pull that information back into any system you want. And, we can do the same thing for any data that's made available in XBRL. So here you can see, for example, sorry, wait, the controls for the webinar are getting confused with it. In this case, this is just what the data looks like when we pull it back from the API. This is sales information for Lockheed Martin, and it brings back a lot of information for you. It brings back the amount, it brings back the period, it brings back a whole bunch of data, and then we can, this API, if you look at the data analysis toolkit, you can see all the information that's available. So any information that's filed in an XBRL format can be made available. So if we look at the margin comparison, you can pull back revenue information, net income information, you can calculate the margin. We've done it for a bunch of companies here, healthcare companies, whatever. Any company that's filing an XBRL data is available. The other thing you can do is you can do a margin analysis over time. Here's FedEx, for example. Obviously, a lot of government agencies use FedEx for shipping. And you can do margin analysis over time. You can chart it. You can do all this kind of thing. So there's a lot of flexibility in how you can use the data. And the other thing that's kind of interesting, this is just the data that's filed, but you can access the metadata as well. And for the Data Act, a lot of that data is going to be made available. If it's made available in XBRL taxonomy, you can use this XBRL tool as well to pull information about information in the taxonomy. So here we have an element, which is the effective income tax rate, which is 35%. And we have a formula which is basically allows you to pull information. If I change these variables here and say documentation, for example, this is going to tell me, it's going to load it, and it's giving me information about what does this element mean. It's percentage of domestic federal tax. Assets, it's telling me information about assets. So what this gives you is quite a lot of flexibility in terms of how you can build applications just by having one of these APIs. All of this stuff is very standardized. This is the advantage of having a standard. You can basically take a lot of these apps. Once the Data Act gets up and going and we get a lot of this data coming available in XBRL, we can take that same data, we can load it into the same database. Things like in this spreadsheet example, you can go and pull that information, look at the taxonomy or look at data that's being reported for different agencies, and it opens up a whole world of different opportunities in the ways that you can use the data. So one of the things I just wanted to show you, just in terms of like the margin comparison, just to give you an example of how this works. Basically, this is how easy it is. You basically have a formula. Anything in green here, you can basically go and basically change the variables in here. I can change the quarters, change whatever they are, and this is just going to recalculate everything. I can change also the element names, the elements I want to look at. I can change the companies. If I wanted to pull data for IBM, for example, I can change the ticker for the company as well, which gives me quite a lot of gives you a lot of flexibility in how you want to be able to pull the data. So you can see, obviously, they've got much better margin than GE in this quarter. So it gives you, it means that you can build up standard templates. You can pull this information. It's updated real time. As soon as a company files, within 5 minutes of that data being filed, it's going to be available in one of these applications. And the same would apply to any data that's being filed by an agency. Once the information is filed, it can be made available very, very rapidly to people who want to be able to use the data. There's no coding or re-entry and that kind of stuff that Mark had talked about that they used to have at the FDIC that needs to occur. So if you want to get more information, if you want to use this API, if you want to have a look at it and see how it works, you can go to our website, and then we have on our website a section on using data. I'll just bring this up and show you where it is. Section here called using data. And if you look at this, we have you can look at some demos and tools here. There's a data analysis toolkit. And this basically gives you links to all the information that you need, how to use it. If you want some developers, you want to develop something or whatever, you can use it. We have some Excel spreadsheets up there as well that you can use and download those, or you can use Google Docs, which I showed you today. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Chandler.
We have time for just a few more, and I see some questions coming through in the QA. So we started out initially with, we kind of framed the discussion. We heard about the value proposition. We heard about the broker and how we might be able to use the data. And we saw 2 case studies on the power of this structured data. One from within government and the FDIC, and one how we could use this XBRL data for public company analysis. So let me, I'm going to start with an easy question. This was for Mark. Mark, you were asking a question about what tools were used to convert for XBRL. You want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah, I answered it online. But the tools, it's actually a customized tool within the Central Data Repository. It's actually offered through a service to the service broker, and then the downstream developers can download it. It's essentially an iXBRL template with the XBRL data tags and some XHTML in the file.
All right, thanks, Mark. And I had one general question. I know, Marcel, this is day 2 for you and Caitlin, but I know you've had your eye on the Data Act for a while. You said your opening was very inspirational, but I am kind of curious. You said that there's kind of a history of failed attempts in the past to standardize data, and this is a kind of a new way of doing it. Can you tell us a little bit about what's different this time from other times, and whether maybe one, 2, or 3 top keys to success to ensuring that the solution is implemented and succeeds? Marcel?
Yeah, Herschel, this is Marcel. You were saying my name?
Yeah, sorry, yeah, Marcel.
Yeah, go ahead. Could you repeat the question, please?
Sorry about that. You were talking about there's been a kind of a history of some failed attempts at standardizing data in the government, and how this is a very large and all-encompassing and powerful initiative. Can you tell us a little bit about what's different this time? What's being done differently to make this a success as opposed to history of not succeeding with this, and what some of the key factors are that relate to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. History of data standards is littered with dead bodies, if you will. There's efforts that we're all familiar with. If you look at your power outlet, when I travel to Europe, I have to know which converter to take my power and plug into. Is it the 2-prong? Is it the 3-prong? Is it the funny shaped pronged? So the reality of standards, bad standards impacting us are prevalent. They're everywhere, and I would say that for the most part, just standards development in general is very difficult. I always use the metaphor of sausage making. People enjoy the sausage, but they don't enjoy the process of making the sausage, and that's very typical of standards development. My background, when I was the invited expert for the United Nations, it was very clear that there wasn't agreement on solving the problem that everyone was brought in to solve. And so what we had to do is we actually had to break it down into very simple components and make it understandable. Because I think just like communication is important in anything, for standards development, especially with the UN or with W3C where it's international, it's very important to understand that everyone's got a different perspective. And I think those lessons also apply to federal government in this country, because it's a multi-domain problem and it's a multi-dimensional solution. So everyone's going to have their context, their bias, their perceptions, their motivations, and bringing all these together can't happen in one meeting. It can't happen, in one silver bullet. There's no silver bullet for this. It's going to take time. And we're up against time with the Data Act. So we need to make decisions. We need to make decisions and find the partners that are willing to take that leap with us. There's been a lot of thought put into how to build something. And, going back to communication, how can we communicate that in a way that is understood? Because, Herschel, I know you know this, but there has been a history of other attempts at trying to solve this problem, and they've stopped for a variety of reasons. I do know, and I believe this personally, you don't climb Mount Everest without setback or sacrifice. There are going to be some steps that are going to be harder to take than others. So those things, I believe that the leadership at Treasury understands that, and they're taking and this is just me, again, my second day, incredible steps to reach out to agencies, to reach out to partners, to reach out to stakeholders, to reach out to just people and find out, what is doable. And also employing some of the things that Caitlin mentioned before, the agile thinking, and also bringing in design thinking. There are new ways of meeting the rising challenges that data is bringing. It's not all green. It's not all happiness. It is difficult and it will be complex, but we need to have people that communicate the complexity, that can have the patience to understand the complexity and to be able to see the vision for what Data Act can bring. And I think that whole stew of innovation is definitely possible. It's definitely doable. And I look forward to the next time we can have an XBRL session to talk about the next steps that we've taken on this journey. Hopefully that helps to answer, Herschel.
It does. Thank you, Marcel. And I think it does everyone a service to remember that it's not just you guys reaching out. Dialogue is a two-way street. So hopefully everyone that's been involved with this always asks for people to reach out. I hope everyone does take the opportunity to reach out and share their thoughts and opinions. Got time for one final question I do want to be sure we get to, and I'm going to combine two into one. The question is, will the Treasury data broker reside at the Treasury level only, so agencies must submit their data to Treasury and wait for feedback, or will each agency have a copy of the broker so they can upload, download data at will? And along with that broker question, you had program as optional on one of your slides. Can you tell us just a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is Caitlin. I guess I'll take the broker question. So the really great thing about this is that we're developing the broker as an open source project. So obviously there will be an instance that resides on a Treasury server and agencies will submit to. We will also very likely build in functionality where you can submit data and validate it without it being published yet. But because it's an open source project, that means there is nothing stopping anybody from taking that software and installing it locally and running that broker locally and testing out the validations and making sure that your data validates before submitting it. I think what we're seeing here is there'll just be different use cases for different agencies. Some of the smaller agencies will probably just kind of submit the data directly to a central broker, whereas some of the larger agencies that are incorporating data from a lot of different business lines and units will want to do the validation locally just so that they can get a sense of that. So that will continue to be developed in the open and have kind of an open source governance around it, so that when we do move to, this will have an ongoing governance for a long time, right? This isn't ever going to be completely finished. So as new versions of the standard come out or the validation come out, people will be able to check out the new code and try out those validations locally, offer feedback, and all of this can kind of happen in a dialogue, and having all that feedback, go back into the process before we just say, like, okay, midnight tonight, the new version of the validation is switching over, make sure your data is ready. So really one of the other reasons I'm excited to work on this team is just because it's open source, which, coming from Sunlight, of course, I'm a huge fan of. What was the second part of the question?
You had appropriations plus object class, which we all expected, but I saw a very interesting plus program that's optional. Can you tell us a little bit about this program optional? What's that about?
Yeah, I think that's from an older version of the slides, actually. As you know, this is kind of an ongoing process with the policy guidance being issued and the new version of the schema. So I think that it's actually based on an older version.
Oh, okay. That's why it was so interesting. All right. Thank you very much. Yeah. All right. So with that, let's turn it back over to Michelle to take us home.
Herschel, thanks so much. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Thanks to all of our speakers. We look forward to having you join us on future events, future programs like this. Thanks very much. Bye now.